You walk through a museum. You stop in front of a wall of broken pottery shards. A plaque tells you they are 12,000 years old. You move on. But what if that wall is hiding something far stranger than a broken pot? What if it is hiding a warning? Most people assume history is a straight line. Caves, then villages, then cities, then you. One long climb upward, brick by brick, with no steps back. But the evidence buried in the ground tells a messier story. A story with gaps, sudden gaps. And in at least one of those gaps, something happened that still does not fully make sense. Around 12,900 years ago, the climate on Earth did something climatologists still argue about today. After thousands of years of warming at the end of the last ice age, the planet suddenly plunged back into cold. Not over centuries. Over a matter of decades, maybe less. Geochemist Wallace Brucker was among the first to map this abrupt shift in detail, studying ice cores and ocean sediment that recorded a climate system slamming into reverse. Scientists named this cold Snap the Younger Dryas, after a small Arctic flower whose pollen suddenly reappeared in European lake beds. Why does a flower matter? Because its return means the warmth that had been building for millennia vanished almost overnight. Grasslands died. Megafauna that had survived the Ice Age itself began disappearing at the same moment. Entire human populations that had been thriving during the warm centuries before now faced a landscape turning hostile beneath their feet. Here is where it gets strange. In 2007, a group of researchers led by Earth scientist James Kennett proposed something bold. They suggested this abrupt cooling might not have been a normal climate wobble at all. It might have been triggered by fragments of a disintegrating comet striking the atmosphere and ice sheets of North America. They pointed to a thin, dark layer found at dig sites across the globe, packed with tiny glass spherules, unusual concentrations of platinum, and traces of soot from massive wildfires. This layer sits exactly at the Younger Dryas boundary. The theory is controversial. Many scientists disagree with it, and the debate continues. But something else happened at almost exactly this same moment in human history, and it is impossible to ignore. In the hills of southeastern Turkey in 1994, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating a hill the locals called Potbelly Hill. What he found underneath rewrote the timeline of civilization. Massive carved limestone pillars, arranged in circles, some weighing more than 10 tons, decorated with foxes, scorpions, vultures, and snakes. The site is called Göbekli Tepe. Its oldest layers date to roughly 11,600 years ago, right at the edge of the Younger Dryas. Think about what that means. This was not a settlement of farmers. There was no agriculture yet at this site, no pottery, no permanent houses. And yet someone organized enough labor to quarry, carve, and raise stones twice the height of a person, arranged with clear symbolic intention. Before farming, before writing, before the wheel. How does a hunter-gatherer society build something like this? Schmidt himself argued that it flipped the old assumption on its head. Temples came first. Farming came after, possibly as a way to feed the workers gathered to build and maintain the site. Something pulled scattered bands of people together, gave them a shared purpose, and organized their labor on a scale historians once thought impossible before cities existed. So you have a sudden global cooling event. You have possible evidence of a cosmic impact layer sitting at that same boundary. And you have the oldest known monumental architecture on Earth appearing at almost that exact moment, built by people who left no other trace of complex society before it. Coincidence? Maybe. Correlation is not causation, and reputable archaeologists urge caution here. But ask yourself this: what kind of event makes hunter-gatherers stop wandering and start building temples out of stone. Fear does that, loss does that, a shared memory of something catastrophic, passed down and turned into ritual, does that. Across dozens of unrelated cultures, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica to ancient Greece, there are flood myths, not one or two. Hundreds, stories of a great deluge that wiped out an earlier world, survived by only a handful of people who rebuilt everything from nothing. Folklorists have long debated why flood narratives appear almost everywhere, independently, across cultures, with no contact with one another. Is it just because floods are common and memorable? That is the simplest explanation, and probably the correct one for many of these stories. But some researchers studying the Younger Dryas period have wondered whether a genuine shared trauma, a real global catastrophe near the end of the Ice Age, could have echoed forward through oral tradition long enough to be recorded once writing was finally invented thousands of years later. You do this too, in miniature, every single day. Your brain does not store history as a clean, ordered file. It stores it as fragments, wrapped in emotion, passed forward until the facts blur, but the feeling stays sharp. Ask someone about a family tragedy from 3 generations back. They rarely know the exact date. They almost always remember the fear. Now, scale that up. Imagine a catastrophe severe enough to end a way of life across an entire hemisphere. No internet, no written language, just voices, repeated across 100 generations, slowly hardening into myth. A flood, a darkened sun, a world before and a world after. Is that what Göbekli Tepe actually is? A memorial? A warning carved in stone by people terrified of forgetting? Nobody can prove that with certainty. The gap between disaster and monument is thousands of years of silence, and silence does not confirm anything. Serious researchers remain split, and the impact hypothesis itself is still being tested and challenged in scientific journals today. This is not settled history. It may never be. But notice what you just did while listening. You started connecting a cold snap, a comet debate, and a circle of carved stone into a single story. You wanted the gap to mean something. You wanted the silence to have a message hidden inside it. That instinct is not new. It might be the oldest instinct you have. Every civilization you have ever lived inside carries an inherited fear that the ground beneath it is not as permanent as it feels, that something came before, that something can end it. You feel it in disaster movies. You feel it in the vague unease of reading about extinct empires. You feel it standing in front of a broken pot behind museum glass, wondering, just for a second, who made it and what happened to them. Maybe that unease is not paranoia. Maybe it is memory, worn down by 10,000 years of retelling, still doing exactly the job it was built to do. So the next time you walk past a wall of ancient pottery and barely glance at it, remember this. Somewhere beneath the ground you are standing on, there may be a hill in Turkey, or a layer of ash and glass in the soil, quietly keeping a 12,000-year-old secret. And it is still hiding something far stranger than a broken pot. It is hiding you.